So to begin making the potassium barf salt, the tetricus fluorinated phenyl borane or borate salt, we need to have our apparatus assembled. So we have a gas inlet right here, a condenser, and an addition funnel, which will go right here after we're done with the funnel. I've got here 3 grams of magnesium turnings, which we'll add to our flask through the funnel. Staticky. And then we will attach our addition funnel. And screwed in place with some rubber bands. Okay, now we'll begin to evacuate this and flush it with nitrogen. Yeah, I'm ready for that. So I'm refilling our apparatus now with nitrogen after it's been under vacuum for probably 10 minutes. Our bubbler there is bubbling. That's the in bubbler. And when it's full, this out bubbler, oh, and there it goes, perfect timing. So our apparatus has now been flushed with nitrogen. We're ready to add our THF. Alright, so we're adding THF to our addition funnel to add to the magnesium. So this is our last portion of 30 mils. I've already done 2 more. Kind of boring, so I didn't show them all. Pull up another 30 mils. Better to do this by cannula straight out of the flask of THF, but I didn't have room over here to do it at the moment when I wanted to set this up. So, THF added, remove our bubbler. So that's all in. Alright, and that's our THF for the magnesium turnings. So to get the reaction initiated, I'm going to add a little bit, 1 milliliter of dibromoethane, 1,2-dibromoethane. I'm also going to rinse that with just another little bit of THF, about 10 mils. dibromethane should help initiate this reaction between the magnesium and the THF. Get this started. Alright, so to add the bis trifluoromethyl bromobenzene, we need another 40 mils of THF here in our addition funnel. That now. So now we need to add the 1,3-bis trifluoromethyl 5-bromobenzene to our addition funnel of THF. We need 8.5 milliliters. We've got some in a beaker here. We'll some of that with a syringe. Our magnesium turnings down here started to get kind of murky, so that means we're ready to move on to the next step, where we can slowly add, and I've got water in the condenser now, slowly begin to add the ether, or the THF and bromobenzene solution. One at a time. 230. This will need to be, we want this to add over about half an hour, 35 minutes. So just turning this really slowly until we get a nice slow drip started. Make sure our sidearm is open so we can equalize the pressure. There we go. Drip. That's a nice rate. Alright, and if the doesn't get going and turn colors in a little while, I'll have to add some paint. I'll come back at that. So our reaction has changed color. It's now a kind of a pinkish brown color. This has been going for about 10 minutes now, so we need to actually kick up this drop dripping rate here. A bit too slow. That might be too fast now. Let's see where we can go. Somewhere in between. It's tricky. Stop cock to do what you want. Yeah. There. Away. Still got quite a bit of solution left. Alright, keep us updated. So, our addition has ended. You can see our reaction is a nice brown color now, as expected. So we're going to let this stir. It's quite warm to the touch for another 30 minutes, and then let it cool. And we'll be ready to add the potassium tetrafluoroborate. So the reaction didn't continue refluxing after the addition of this on its own. To my liking, so I'm going to add a water bath here and heat it for 20 minutes once we reach temperature to get a bit more of a reflux on this before we add the potassium tetrafluoroborate. Alright, so our flask has gone back to room temperature after an extra half hour of heating. We're going to now remove our addition funnel. We need to turn on some gas for that. Grease out of our neck, put our funnel in, and in our 1 gram of potassium tetrafluoroborate. And then close it back up with a greased stopper. This can sit and stir. We'll go back to it. Don't forget to label your flask. So we'll let this stir overnight. Back for the next steps. Alright, I've disassembled our apparatus and I've got our solution of potassium bicarbonate and potassium carbonate here. This is not all going to fit in there. Alright, so I began to add the solution and I realized it's not going to fit in this flask, so we're going to transfer everything over to this beaker. I think we can leave the magnesium turnings behind, so we'll stop rinsing that now. We'll add the rest of this. And I'll add a larger stir bar. And get some better stirring going on. And then we'll stir that for 15 minutes. I'll be back for the next step. Alright, our 15 minutes are up, so we're ready to filter this off now. So we want the liquid portion for the next steps. So we're going to turn on our vacuum for our filter here. There's a lot of solid here, so this may clog the filter. Hopefully it's not too bad. Leave behind the majority of the magnesium shirtings and the stir bars. We don't need those in there. Alright. And now we just wait on the filtration. Okay, we've filtered off our solids and then we've got a solution now that has 2 layers, which is pretty interesting. So we're going to pour that now into a separatory funnel. And then to that we're going to add 50 milliliters of diethyl ether. So I've added our ether to our 2 solutions here. So we're going to shake and vent this a bit. We'll let it separate out and we'll drain off the aqueous layer. Alright, the phases have separated out. So we'll drain off the aqueous portion into this beaker. We'll put the ether portion in this roundabout or Erlenmeyer flask. Alright, now we'll put the the aqueous portion back in the funnel. And add to the funnel another 50 milliliters of diethyl ether. Layers. I'm going to shake and vent again to mix them together and extract the aqueous layer with the organic, with the ether. Drain off the water and collect the ether again into this solution, which will then evaporate, or which we'll move on for the further treatment of. So I'll let this settle and do one more washing of the aqueous layer with another 50 milliliters of ether, and then we'll move on to drying this. So I've got our ether washings in a flask here with a stir bar, and to that I'm going to add some anhydrous magnesium sulfate to remove any residual water. Add a healthy amount. One more scoop about that size. Like we might need more. We want to see some of it kind of flurrying around like snow. There we go. That's looking better. All right, I'll let that stir for a while and then we'll move on to the next step. So it's been stirring a while with the magnesium sulfate, and we're probably good to let it, to filter it off now and prepare to rotovap it. So I'll take it off the stirring here. And I'm already set up for filtration, just straight into a round bottom. Turn on our vacuum. It looks like it's not all going to fit in this flask, but that's okay. We'll just keep filtering in the portions as we evaporate them down. Bringing it back in when we're ready to try to start cleaning up the oil. So after evaporating our solution and concentrating it now, we have a brown oil. You can see it won't evaporate further than that. So what we can do now is add DCM, about 5 milliliters, 5 to 10 milliliters. Just gonna kind of roughly estimate that, maybe a little bit more. Add about 10 in that beaker. And then we'll add about 20 milliliters of hexane. Those together. And the layers don't want to mix together, so we probably have a bit of THF still around. We'll come back over to the rotovap, and we will set this to a really gentle pressure. So here, this one has a pressure regulator. 40C hexane evaporates, or DCM evaporates at atmospheric pressure, so we'll go up to 390, and then start trying to just evaporate off the DCM and leave the hexane behind. So we're leaving behind the bad solvent, and that should help crystallize out the potassium BARF salt. So I set this up again. This time I added more DCM until the two layers of solution mix together. I don't think it will work properly if the hexane layer sits on top. You'll just pull the hexane off and totally leave the oil and DCM mixture untouched. So we'll give this a shot on really low pressure. I'm going to set to 400. Have it just barely kiss the hot bath here. Set it to 40C, and we'll see what that gets us. So I've got my potassium BARF here, finally dry, pretty dry after breaking that oil. Took about 4 treatments of DCM and hexanes, so adding DCM, minimal DCM and hexanes and evaporating it off. It kind of turned into like a big cake after the second one, and then I just had to keep hitting it with a little bit of DCM and more hexanes to get it, and then I'm pulling on it to get the rest of it to go. And there's still a little bit of it's kind of a little bit wet still, but should be able to wash it with the cold DCM now, which is what we're going to do, and get a nice white powder. So I'm going to take some DCM that I've had in the freezer for a while. Good swirl. Turn on our vacuum here. Let me grab a spatula. Alright, so I've kind of scraped it off the frit a little bit, and I'm going to rinse out my flask with a bit more DCM. We've got some kind of dark brown chunks, but there is a nice white powder here in the frit now, in the funnel. Try to crush up some of those brown chunks. All right, we'll let that dry, and then we'll collect it in a vial. And here is the collected potassium BARF, dried and in a vial. There should be a little bit more, but the DCM washing step takes quite a bit of it with it. So if you get the DCM colder, you might get a bit better yield of it not being quite so brown. So anyway, that's all for this lab. Okay, so now we're going to begin the synthesis of ferrocenium BARF. So we've got some ferrocenium PF6 here. We're going to add, this is 150 milligrams, we're going to add that to our flask. We've also got potassium BARF now. Half a gram, 500 milligrams. like in the neck of the funnel. And to that, we're going to add 60 milliliters of dichloromethane. Use that to rinse out our funnel, rinse off our spatula. Lower down our condenser and turn the water on. I'll get a clamp set up to check the temperature of our oil bath here, but we need to reflux this for half an hour. So we need to, the oil should be hot already, so it should be very close to reflux temperature already. So our reflux is over. It's been a half an hour. You can see it's bubbling away there nicely. So we're going to turn our heat off and lower our bath. Just let it cool. But actually, since this isn't that hot, we're going to go ahead and move it directly to the rotovap. Move the solvent. Let's carefully do this. That's very greasy. That's good to tell. Alright, we'll evaporate off the solvent on the rotovap. So here's our reflux solution evaporated down to a solid. To that we're going to add some diethyl ether to extract it. Let me set it to filter this solution through into that flask. Alright, got just a Buchner funnel set up. Kind of a brownish green solid we're leaving behind. Let's extract that with just a little bit more ether. wash our funnel. The solution coming through is clear. And we've got a bunch of brown salt on our fret here, which would be potassium PF6. So now we'll concentrate this down to about 10 milliliters on the rotovap, and then we'll move on to the next step. So we've concentrated our solution of ether with our ferrocenium barf down to 10 milliliters or less. To that we're going to add a bunch of pentane. We've got 70 milliliters here. It's going to be very full in our little vial flask here. Alright, well I got about 60 in there, that's okay. So now we're going to filter this off. So we've got a filter again here. Beaker funnel. Filter paper. Take our solution and filter it off. Pentane to get everything out of there. Just a little bit more in there. Excellent. All right, and then we'll actually just a bit more pentane to wash our compound in the filter. Just another 5 milliliters or so. There's our, let's see, there we go, our blue compound. Set that aside for just a moment. Going to get rid of our filter flask waste here, and I'll put the funnel of compound back on the funnel and dry it with the vacuum stream. Alright, let's see how dry our ferrocenium barf is. Looks very good. Alright. So we'll take this over here. And we can do a further recrystallization. I'm going to put some of this compound in this vial. Just go ahead and put it all in there. now that we've got that, we're going to dissolve it in a minimal amount of dichloromethane. So what I'm doing down here, I've got a bottle of dichloromethane. Okay. So I think I've got this kind of large vial basically. It has a ground glass joint to seal, and I filled it with a little bit of pentane. I'm actually going to add just a tiny bit more. I can do it without spilling everywhere. There we go. So, then what we're going to do is take our vial of Ferrocenium barf dissolved in ECM and place it into this larger vial with the pentane around it. Adjust the camera here. So we've got kind of the two separate solutions, the pentane around the outside and the DCM solution in the center, and then this is we'll set up a vapor diffusion. So in the freezer, the pentane will slowly diffuse into the DCM solution and hopefully give us some nice crystals of Ferrocenium barf. So we can check on our recrystallization in here. The vapor diffusion for the PF6 is going to take quite a bit longer. There's already a little bit depositing on the edges there. You can see that kind of line, but we need more of the pentane to diffuse in there, which will take more than a day. So, but as you saw in the filter paper and just now comparing to the stuff from previous years, this is already pretty good. So this could have been used from how we had it. So we'll just leave that in here for now. And just to show the difference in color between Ferrocenium PF6 and Ferrocenium barf, we've got the two here. So that's PF6 on the left and barf on the right. So they're a different color. The Ferrocenium barf is a bit more lighter colored and a little bit more green. The PF6 is quite dark, almost black, very dark blue. So we're now going to make silver barf. So I've got in this vial flask here 1/2 gram of potassium barf that I've kind of flushed this with nitrogen, and this is 90 milligrams of silver nitrate. We're going to add to that some dry acetonitrile, and we don't need need our solvent dry. I don't believe air-free is critical for this. So and I've got 7 milliliters. I'm going to put 5 milliliters in here. And the other 2 in the sulfur. And we'll get those dissolved. Alright, I've got the two solutions dissolved. Now we're going to pour the silver nitrate solution into the potassium BARF solution. So I'm going to get a little bit of nitrogen flow on this side. Just so that we don't get any water in our solution that way. Put it in our funnel. And pour in our silver nitrate solution. Alright, now we'll let that stir a little bit and then we will move on. So now to precipitate more of the potassium nitrate that we'll be forming, we're going to add some ether. I'm going to pour in about 20 milliliters of ether to this beaker. Disconnect it from this. Now I've got a Grignard funnel with a filter paper in it. So put that on our filter flask up here. The vacuum and filter our solution. You can see some of the precipitate there on the flask. Alright, and we'll move on to the next step of putting that in the freezer with some pentane. So before we get to putting this in the freezer with some pentane, we need to evaporate it to dryness. Put it on the rotovap. And evaporate away our ether and acetonitrile. So our silver BARF solution is evaporated down to this oil. It doesn't want to go any further than that. So I'm going to move to the next step now by dissolving this in minimal DCM and then filtering it. I need to do that in the dark though, which is going to make filling difficult. So I'm just going to do that off camera and we'll see what we get from doing this in the dark. So I've got our filtrate here, the liquid that came through the filter, in a little bit of DCM in this vial. I'm going to layer hexanes on top of that. So to do that, got a bottle here with some hexanes in it. And I'm going to add the hexanes down the side of the vial carefully. Try to form 2 layers of solution. This can be pretty difficult normally, and even in the dark, it's especially difficult. Probably 2 more pipettes. See if we can get it to show up on camera. And then I'll put it in the freezer. I'll lift this carefully so I don't disturb the layers. Yeah, looks like it's layered. There's a darker layer on the bottom and then the more transparent hexanes above. Okay, I'm gonna label that, and that's our silver barf. Put that in the freezer. See if we can grow some nice clear, colorless crystals of silver barf. So our layers have kind of mixed, but you'll see, if you look there, there's some solid chunks and then kind of a weird greenish brown oil floating around. So we're gonna pipette that off and see if we can't get those solid bits separate from the rest and have them weighed up. Try to suck up that green stuff first so we get that out of there. This solid shouldn't be soluble in the hexane. So if we can get rid of the green stuff. We should have nice clean pieces of silver barf. A swirl so we can move those brownish, greenish oil stuff around again. It's kind of stuck on some of the larger pieces. Go. You can see we've got a pretty substantial amount there. The brown discoloration, maybe we can wash away with a bit more hexane. Let me try that right now. And just a little bit more. A bit of a swirl. Well, it's hard to say if the little rinse there with hexane did anything, but there we go. We've got silver barf.